Hello and welcome to this Geekatplay view tutorial. This is the fourth in our beginners tutorial series, and today we'll be talking about how to create a terrain. And Vue is one of the most powerful applications to be using terrains. They really shine, and I think you'll see why as we talk about this today. There are three different things you can do. If you click on this and you hold, you have your normal terrain and your fractal terrain, and you have a user defined terrain, and that basically you can define the size and you can say if you want it to be fractal or not, and we won't be doing that today. What I want to do is talk to you a little bit about the difference between the normal terrain and the procedural or the fractal terrains. So first we'll start with a normal terrain. And you see this just pops up. We have our camera kind of right in the middle of it. So we'll move that out a little bit. And now we can get kind of a good look at it. Now we're going to select that terrain again. And I want to right click and then edit the object. And now we come up with our terrain editor. And there are a lot of things that you can do with this. If you press 0 edges here, it kind of flattens out the edges along here if you want that. And if you reset it, you don't get anything anymore. So we can click on mountain and we'll get a mountain. A peak will kind of just bring it all up to a peak, and eroded is interesting because it gives you a mountain that's maybe a lot older. A canyon of some plateaus. It just gives you some different kinds of looks. And if you click this picture here, you can load in a picture that will affect what your terrain looks like, but we won't worry about that too much right now. So we'll just have a mountain here. And we'll reset it because we don't want anything else here that we've had. So we have our canyon and we've eroded our canyon there. See, they just kind of add on to each other. There's our regular dunes. Our iceberg. And our lunar landscape. Just a lot of fun things you can do. We'll reset it, bring back our mountain, and now there's some things you can do here in the paint tab. If you right click, and make sure you right click on that, you can manipulate it, this hand kind of, and you can spin it around. In fact, if you move it over here, right click, you can just kind of make it spin. And then you go like that to stop it, right click. But if you left click, you have these different kinds of things you can do with the brush in your paint mode, and you can change your settings. We won't worry too much about that, but I'm on dig right now. So if I do that, look how that kind of digs into there. Or if I want to raise something up, I can build up some peaks. And that has its uses too. Altitude just kind of changes all of that. And that just kind of flattens it all out to one single altitude. And then there's some eroding that you can do. Let's reset that and bring back our regular mountain to look at that. And the eroding is just different. And see how that erodes it a little different, the glaciers. And you can just have fun playing around with that. And it just does a lot of, let's bring in a canyon and do some wind here. You know, when you see how that affects it. It's just kind of fun, play around with that. And The effects, you can bring in some grit. See how that changes and adds, or pebbles, that's a little bit rougher. Stones, gravel. That just brings in different kinds of, if we have a mountain and we click terraces, let's reset that and bring in our mountain and click terraces. See, that changes it a little bit. So that's just the different things that you can do with it. It's kind of fun. And add some craters in there. We're just playing around. So I'll reset it, bring back the mountain, and we'll click OK. Okay, and now I just want to move this terrain aside. And bring in a fractal or a procedural train and show you the difference. The first thing you notice is that it has little triangles in it instead of just the squares. And let's zoom out here. The next thing you notice is this appears to have a lot more detail than this. That's because this is already kind of formed and rendered out, but this one forms as you render it. The math works a little differently here, and you can see already that there are more details in the preview render here than in the fractal in this preview render than here in the normal train. And this is true especially as you move the camera up close. So let's take this camera and we'll point it over here and move it in close. And you see, the closer you get, the fewer details you have here. We've gone into it now. And now if I move it over here and point it at that, we get in closer. What you see is that we actually get more details. And that's because as the camera gets closer, the computer actually calculates in more details. But with the normal terrain, there's a set number of polygons and it won't calculate any more detail into that. You know, let me just go ahead and show you a render of the difference between that. So I'll point it here. Move the camera in as close as I can get. And hit render. We'll render this to the screen in preview mode at 640. And see how these lines just kind of start to get straight. There's really not very good resolution in here. Now if we do the same thing to our fractal train, get in here as close as we can. And I'll do a quick render here. You notice it takes a little bit longer, and that's because it's calculating out these higher details that you can see in here. See how many more details? And you know, you could almost see the grains of the dirt if you get in there enough. So we'll move our camera back. I'll point it here. And then the advantage, of course, that we talked about before is that there's a much longer render with the fractals, and a much slower and a much faster render with the normal terrains. And what you can do is you can take this fractal terrain, we'll move it up so that it's in front. I'm going to zoom out using my scroll bar on my mouse, and now I want to select this train and I'll move it just behind here. And I'll go ahead and make it a little bit taller, make it a little bit longer, and we'll bring in another one like that. Normal terrain. And we'll go behind there and make that one also a little bit taller. We're just kind of putting in a mountain range back here. One other thing I wanted to show you, I'm sorry, let's back up. With the Fractal Train, let's right click edit. You can edit the Fractal Trains. You don't get some of the things that you got with the Fractal Trains. But now you have a new tab where you can change it using functions and using this, and that's something that's we'll talk about a lot later. So you can do some painting with this. There's some limitations with what you can do here. If we press 0 edges, it changes that. It's different than with the normal train. We just get it so the edges come right up. So we don't really want to do it that way. So I'll just click the X on here. But you can edit it in a lot of the same ways and take a look around at it. So now we have our train here and we're up front. I'm going to move the camera. Whoop. Didn't want to do that. Select the camera, move the camera in. And get the camera right in there so we can see those details. And let's do a render of that. And you can kind of tell these are in the background. There's fewer details, but you know, you might even think, well, that looks a lot different. And one of the ways you could cover that up a little bit is just to put some material onto there. And so we'll go ahead and do that. And the easy way to put material on is to select what you have. And you can either right click here and select loaded material, or you can click on this button and it just loads the material. And there's lots of materials that you can have. I'm here in the water. You can select on landscapes, materials that have different layers in them, just some rockscape, and you can see a lot of different kinds of things that you can do with this. It really, the materials are really interesting, but of course we're going to work with a landscape, and I think we'll do a deadland, and that's kind of interesting one, especially when you get up close, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And then you want to put some materials on our other objects here. Load a material, and I think those I'll make rocks and plants. You can select that. Load a material, rocks and plants. Okay. And you can kind of get an idea of what it's looking like in here. I think I want to load an atmosphere in here. And there's a lot of interesting atmospheres. Again, in view, you can scroll through them. And let's just see what high altitude gives us. See, a little more light, a little interest. We're in a mountain desert type of an environment here. And so I'll do a quick preview render of that. Now, if we had used fractal terrains on all of our terrains, it would have been a lot slower to render. But what we're doing here is we're kind of optimizing what we can do. We don't need that much detail in the background, but we want some up front. And so here you can see there's this cracked kind of dirt right here, and it looks pretty interesting. And then here's our mountains just in the background right here. And so those are just some ways that you can work with your terrains and how you can bring them in and edit them if you want. And there's just a lot of different things you can do. And we've worked a little bit with materials here. And in our next tutorial, we will be working extensively with the materials. And so we're excited about all these different things that we're learning with Vue. And we hope you are too. And we hope it helps your creativity in using this great program. And we thank you for watching this Vue tutorial. If you have any questions or if you want some resources, we have a lot of resources there, and we have a forum. Please visit us at www.geekatplay.com or www.vuetutorials.com.